Okay, here's how a perfectly nice Saturday morning turned into a bureaucratic street fight I never asked for, but was uniquely qualified to finish. I pulled my sensible, slightly boring sedan onto Grandpa Arthur's street, Serenity Springs Estates, a name dripping with the kind of enforced tranquility only an overzealous homeowners association can provide. I'd driven down from D.C., escaping the swamp of legislative sessions and endless clause debates for a weekend with my favorite octogenarian. I was looking forward to coffee, maybe helping him troubleshoot his ancient laptop, definitely not dealing with HOA drama. But drama, it seemed, was already camped out on the porch. Maria Garcia, the contractor we'd hired, was standing by the front door, looking like she'd just been served divorce papers by certified mail. She was holding a piece of paper so violently orange it probably violated some local ordinance itself. And through the window, I could see Grandpa Arthur at his kitchen table, back ramrod straight, fingers flying across his tablet screen with a familiar, frustrated intensity. This couldn't be good. "Maria?" I called out, grabbing my overnight bag. "What's going on? Problem with the alarm install?" We were putting in a new visual fire alarm system strobes tied into the smoke detectors. Standard stuff for someone like Grandpa, who'd lost most of his hearing decades ago thanks to Uncle Sam and some poorly insulated engine rooms. Maria waved the orange paper like a distress flag. "Problem? Alex, this woman, Karen? Miller? Your grandpa's HOA overlord? She slapped this on the door 30 minutes ago." Her voice was tight with disbelief and anger. "Says we have to stop work immediately. Talking about fire code violations, talking about eviction." My stomach did a slow, cold plunge. Eviction? Over installing safety equipment? I took the notice from Maria's hand. The paper felt cheap and aggressive. "Notice of immediate cease and desist and pending eviction hearing," screamed the header in bold, slightly crooked type. Below it, multiple violations of Serenity Springs Fire Safety Code, Addendum 7, Sections 4B, 9C, and 11A, unauthorized electrical modification, improper signaling devices, failure to maintain clear egress pathway. Immediate rectification required within 48 hours to avoid further action. "What the hell is this?" I muttered, reading the alleged violations again. Unauthorized electrical modification, improper signaling devices, failure to maintain clear egress pathway. It sounded like a random word salad generated by a paranoid algorithm. Serenity Springs Fire Safety Code Addendum 7? Since when does the HOA have its own fire code? I pushed the door open. The smell of Grandpa's strong coffee and old books hit me, usually a comforting scent, now tinged with tension. He looked up from his tablet, his expression grim but his eyes sharp. He could read lips like a champ, especially mine. "Hey, Grandpa," I said, forcing a calm I didn't feel. I held up the notice. "What's Karen on about this time?" I signed the gist of it, too. "Karen? Problem? What?" He sighed, a puff of air that spoke volumes, and turned his tablet towards me. He'd typed out a message in his usual concise style. "Karen barged over about an hour ago, ranting about Maria's work. Said the new strobe lights are illegal fire hazards. Said my model train layout in the spare room blocks an exit. Claimed my vibrating alarm clock under the pillow is a fire risk. Said I had 48 hours to rectify. Tear out the alarms, remove the trains, or face an eviction hearing Monday night." I read it twice. Strobe lights. Visual fire alarms. Are fire hazards? His vibrating alarm clock, designed specifically for the deaf and hard of hearing, is a fire risk? And the egress pathway? "The model train set?" I asked incredulously. "Signing train? Problem?" He nodded, typing again quickly. "Says it blocks the way out if there's a fire. In the hobby room." The hobby room. The smallest bedroom. The one overlooking the backyard. The one currently occupied by a 4 by 8 foot piece of plywood holding the N-scale layout of the B&O Railroad, circa 1955. I'd started building when I was 10, and Grandpa had meticulously helped finish. It sat against the far wall, leaving ample space to walk around, and the room had 2 perfectly functional windows leading directly outside. Failure to maintain clear egress pathway, I mumbled, thinking back to the notice. That language usually referred to hallways blocked by furniture, doors that couldn't open fully, actual impediments to escape, not a train set in a spare room, and improper signaling devices. We were installing NFPA 72 compliant visual alarms, the gold standard precisely because he's deaf. This wasn't just wrong, it felt targeted, maliciously incompetent. Just as that thought solidified, a shadow fell across the porch. Speak of the devil, and she shall appear, armed with a clipboard and an aura of unshakable self-importance. Karen Miller, HOA president, scourge of improperly placed recycling bins, marched across Grandpa's lawn like she owned the place, which, in her mind, she probably did. Alexander. Her voice was crisp, devoid of warmth. She probably saw my car pull up. Surveillance was likely listed under community engagement in her HOA duties. I see you received the notice. I trust your grandfather will comply immediately. This situation is untenable and poses a significant risk to the community. Time to deploy the professional calm. Years wrangling lobbyists and navigating semantic minefields on Capitol Hill had to be good for something. Karen, I said, keeping my voice level, meeting her gaze. Good morning. We were just reviewing the notice. There seems to be some confusion regarding these alleged violations. There is no confusion, she stated flatly. The rules are quite clear. Are they? I held up the orange paper. Let's start with Section 4B, Unauthorized Electrical Modification. Maria, the contractor, submitted detailed plans for the visual alarm installation to the Architectural Review Committee 2 weeks ago. You yourself acknowledged receipt via email. Karen sniffed. Acknowledging receipt is a procedural formality, Alexander. It does not constitute approval. Any modification to the building's electrical systems requires explicit, prior, written consent, which was not obtained. Therefore, the work is unauthorized and, given the nature of flashing lights, potentially hazardous. Hazardous? I echoed. These are Underwriters Laboratories listed. NFPA 72 compliant devices designed to save lives. They supplement the existing audible alarms my grandfather cannot hear. How is enhancing fire safety for a resident with a disability considered hazardous or unauthorized? Because, Karen leaned in slightly, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper that still carried, those flashing lights, the frequency. It could be disorienting. Trigger episodes. It likely violates Section 9C regarding disruptive lighting patterns. Disruptive lighting patterns? I felt a sudden, absurd urge to laugh. Karen, are you referring to the section of the bylaws governing excessive wattage in Christmas decorations? She flushed slightly, but didn't back down. Section 9C grants the board broad authority to regulate any lighting deemed disruptive to community harmony or safety. The strobing effect is clearly disruptive. Okay, she was definitely just making things up now, or twisting existing rules beyond recognition. My internal legislator was screaming blue murder about due process and regulatory overreach. And the egress pathway? Section 11A? You're saying his model train set constitutes an obstruction serious enough to warrant eviction? Section 11A is perfectly clear, she recited, tapping her clipboard. All designated egress pathways, including those in rooms potentially usable for sleeping as per original architectural plans, must remain unobstructed by furniture, stored items, or hobby materials. That room is designated as Bedroom 3 on the county records. The train set is a violation. Flammable glues and paints associated with such hobbies also increase fire load. "It's a hobby room," I countered, struggling to keep my voice down. "It hasn't been a bedroom in 40 years. The flammable materials consist of maybe half an ounce of non-toxic model glue. And the train set is against the far wall, 3 feet from the nearest window." "Regulations are regulations," Karen said with chilling finality. "Compliance is mandatory. Your grandfather has 48 hours to remove the unauthorized signaling devices, cease all related electrical work, and clear the egress pathway. Failure to comply will result in the scheduled eviction hearing proceeding on Monday evening, where the board will vote on punitive measures up to and including forced vacating of the premises." She gave a tight, satisfied smile. "Have a compliant weekend, Alexander." She turned on her heel and marched back towards her own perfect lawn, leaving a wake of bewildered fury. Maria looked at me, her eyes wide. She can't be serious, right? Eviction? Over model trains and safety lights?" "I don't know if she's serious, but she's definitely dangerous," I said grimly. I looked at Grandpa Arthur. He was watching us, his face set. He typed rapidly on his tablet and showed it to me. "She's been after me since I refused to pay the special assessment for the new Serenity fountain at the entrance. Called it frivolous spending. She doesn't like being challenged." Of course. It wasn't about fire codes. It was about control. And maybe something uglier targeting the old guy, the deaf guy, the one she thought wouldn't fight back effectively. "Okay," I said, taking a deep breath. "New plan. Maria, can you stick around for a bit? I need to talk through the codes with you, the real ones. Grandpa, can you pull out that giant 3-ring binder with the HOA covenants, conditions, and restrictions? The one that weighs about 15 pounds? He gave a curt nod, a spark of determination in his eyes. Maria looked hesitant. "Alex, she said she'd call the cops if I touched another wire." "Let her," I said, a cold resolve settling over me. "Let her call the cops. Let her call the fire department. Let her call the National Guard if she wants. She wants to talk codes? Fine, let's talk codes." We spent the next hour at the kitchen table. Maria spread out her schematics for the visual alarm system, highlighting the NFPA 72 compliance points, the UL listings, the low-voltage wiring specifics. Grandpa Arthur produced the formidable HOA binder, its pages filled with dense legalese, amendments, and addendums, including, sure enough, a flimsy photocopied page titled Addendum 7, Fire Safety Enhancement Regulations, dated 6 months ago and signed only by Karen Miller as president. I pulled out my laptop, connecting to the house Wi-Fi. My fingers flew across the keyboard, accessing databases I usually navigated for committee briefings. The International Fire Code, IFC, the International Residential Code, IRC, the National Electrical Code, NEC, and of course, the National Fire Protection Association standards, particularly NFPA 72, National Fire Alarm and Signaling Code. "Okay, look here," I said, pointing at my screen, then at Maria's plans. NFPA 72, Chapter 18, Notification Appliances. Section 18.5 covers visual characteristics. It specifies minimum flash rates, intensities, pulse durations, all designed for maximum visibility in smoke. Precisely what these units provide. I then pulled up the HOA's Addendum 7 again. Her Section 9C, Disruptive Lighting, doesn't exist in the filed HOA bylaws we found online, only in this loose page she inserted. The actual Section 9 covers holiday decorations and exterior illumination limits. Maria's eyes widened. So she just made it up? Or grossly misinterpreted something and wrote it down as gospel, I said. Now, Section 4B, Unauthorized Electrical Modification. Karen's claiming any electrical work needs ARC approval. Let's check the main CC and Rs. I scrolled through the PDF Grandpa had found. Article 5, Section 3, Architectural Control. It requires approval for modifications visible from the street or affecting the external appearance or structural integrity. Installing internal, low-voltage signaling devices arguably falls outside this, especially if plans were submitted as a courtesy, which they were. And even if it did apply, denying necessary safety equipment could be a Fair Housing Act violation regarding reasonable accommodations. Grandpa tapped my arm and showed me his tablet. Check Article 21, Compliance with Law. I found it. Bingo, Article 21, Section 1. All association rules and regulations must comply with applicable federal, state, and local laws. National and local fire codes, ADA, Fair Housing Act. They all supersede Karen's homemade addendum. And the egress pathway? Maria asked. Section 11A she mentioned? Doesn't seem to exist in the official bylaws under that numbering, I said, scanning again. There's a general nuisance clause, Article 9, but nothing about hobby materials blocking egress in specific rooms. The actual fire code definitions under IRC Section R 311 are about clear width in hallways, stairways, door operations. A model train against a wall in a spare room wouldn't even register unless it was physically blocking a required exit door from opening. I looked up the definition of fire load just for kicks. Yeah, a few plastic buildings and tiny metal trains don't exactly qualify as a significant fire load compared to, say, furniture or stacks of newspapers. Maria let out a long breath. So, it's all bogus? A carefully constructed edifice of bogusness designed to intimidate, I confirmed. She's banking on no one checking, no one knowing the actual rules. Grandpa typed. So what now, ignore her? No, I said firmly. Ignoring bullies like her only makes them bolder. We fight back. With the rules, the real ones. Right on cue, flashing blue and red lights pulsed through the living room window. Karen, seeing no tools being packed and no panicked compliance, had made good on her threat. A police cruiser pulled up to the curb behind my car. Showtime, I muttered, grabbing my laptop and the HOA binder. Maria, stay calm. Let me handle this. Officers Jenkins and Riley approached the porch. Jenkins, older, salt and pepper hair, had that weary seen-it-all look. Riley, younger, seemed more alert, maybe slightly less jaded by suburban disputes. Folks, we got a call about a disturbance? Unpermitted work? Possible code violations? Jenkins asked, his eyes scanning me. Maria, the open front door where Grandpa stood watching. Before I could speak, Karen hurried over from her yard again, clipboard at the ready. Officers, thank you for responding so promptly. As I explained on the phone, this contractor, she pointed accusingly at Maria, is performing unpermitted, hazardous electrical work in direct violation of community safety codes. The resident, she nodded towards Grandpa, is refusing to cease and desist despite receiving this formal notice. She thrust the orange paper at Jenkins. Jenkins took it, read it with a non-committal expression. Okay, ma'am. And sir, he looked at me. What's your side of the story? Time to deploy calm, relentless facts. Officer Jenkins, Officer Riley, good morning. My name is Alex Peterson. This is my grandfather, Arthur Peterson's home. I gestured to Grandpa, who gave the officers a polite nod. Miss Miller, the HOA president, is attempting to stop the installation of federally recognized, ADA-compliant visual fire alarms for my grandfather, who is deaf. ADA-compliant? Riley repeated, looking towards Grandpa with perhaps a flicker of sympathy. Yes, I confirmed. We're improving his fire safety and ensuring compliance with national standards for accessibility. The violations Miss Miller is citing appear to be based on misinterpretations or fabrications within her own HOA documents which contradict established county and national safety codes. Karen bristled. They are our established community codes, officer. Voted on and approved, designed for the specific needs and safety of Serenity Springs residents. This work is unauthorized, the devices themselves are improper, and she pointed towards the house again, has flammable materials dangerously obstructing a fire exit. Jenkins looked from Karen's flushed face to my deliberately calm one. Flammable materials? Obstructed exit? She's referring to a model train set in a spare room, officer, I explained patiently. And the improper devices are life-saving equipment. Officer, I deal with the intricacies of the National Fire Code, the IRC, and related accessibility regulations, like the Fair Housing Act amendments daily. The claims on this notice are demonstrably false under any accepted legal or safety standard. I held up my laptop. Would you like me to show you the relevant sections of NFPA 72, Chapter 18, concerning notification appliances for the hearing impaired, or perhaps the IRC definition of means of egress? Jenkins and Riley exchanged a look. It was a mixture of confusion and perhaps a dawning realization that this wasn't their typical neighbor's tree hangs over my fence dispute. They were wading into technical territory they likely hadn't brushed up on since the academy. Jenkins cleared his throat. Look, this seems complicated. We're not fire code inspectors. Ma'am, he turned to Karen, do you have documentation showing these specific HOA rules were properly adopted and filed, and that they don't conflict with county ordinances? Karen puffed up. Of course! It's Addendum 7, right here! She waved her clipboard, but didn't detach any papers. And sir, Jenkins looked at me, you're saying this work is actually required for safety? Required for equal safety access, officer, I clarified, and certainly permitted under all applicable codes adopted by this county. Denying it could actually put the HOA in legal jeopardy. Okay, Jenkins said slowly, clearly wanting out of this regulatory rabbit hole. Here's what I suggest. Everyone just take a step back for today. Ma'am, hold off on the enforcement threats. Sir, maybe hold off on the actual wiring until this is clarified. We can't make a determination on HOA rules versus fire codes. You might need to involve city code enforcement or the fire marshal's office if you can't resolve it amicably. Karen looked furious that they weren't arresting Maria on the spot, but she couldn't force them. Fine, but the 48-hour notice stands. The hearing is Monday. The officers gave us all a final play-nice look and retreated to their cruiser, likely radioing dispatch about a civil dispute, parties advised. As soon as they were gone, I turned to Maria. Okay, no work today, just to keep the peace. But this isn't over. I looked at Grandpa. He gave me a determined nod. I pulled out my phone again. Time to escalate. Bureaucrat style. Brenda, hey, it's Alex. Happy Saturday. Brenda was my chief of staff on the committee, a force of nature who knew how to navigate the labyrinthine corridors of power better than anyone. Yeah, sorry to bother you. Listen, quick question could possibly turn into a request for official letterhead later. I'm at my grandpa's place in Fairfax County. Yes, Arthur. He's fine. But we're dealing with an absolutely insane HOA president who's trying to evict him based on fabricated fire code violations related to installing visual alarms. Yes, exactly. Could you do me a massive favor? Verify the county's official adoption status of the latest IFC edition, and NFPA 72, specifically Chapter 18. And also, remember that hearing we had last year on HR 3452, the Senior Citizens Safety and Accessibility Act? Could you possibly dig up the official committee report, or maybe even the comment letter we sent to HUD regarding visual alarm requirements in housing receiving federal assistance? Grandpa's place isn't federally assisted, but the language might be persuasive? Yeah, email it over when you can. Thanks, Brenda. You're a lifesaver. Beer next week. I hung up, feeling the familiar thrill of legislative research, now weaponized for personal use. Grandpa Arthur watched me, a small smile playing on his lips. He typed, "Using the big guns now?" I grinned back, signing, "She started a code war. She just doesn't know I have the entire arsenal." The rest of Saturday and Sunday were a strange mix of tense waiting and strategic preparation. I helped Grandpa draft a formal, polite, but firm letter to the HOA board members, bypassing Karen as president for direct communication, outlining the situation, referencing the police visit, and stating our intention to consult the fire marshal. I attached copies of Maria's plans, the alarm specs, and highlighted the relevant sections of the actual HOA bylaws versus Karen's Phantom Addendum 7. Maria, meanwhile, did her own digging and found online neighborhood forums buzzing with complaints about Karen Miller's heavy-handed tactics over the years, fining people for the wrong shade of mailbox paint, measuring lawn heights with a ruler, trying to ban certain breeds of dogs. It seemed Karen had a history of petty tyranny, but she'd never tried something as serious as eviction based on fake safety codes before. Brenda came through late Saturday afternoon with the email. Fairfax County had indeed adopted the 2021 International Fire Code and referenced NFPA 72 explicitly in their ordinances. The committee letter on HR 3452 was even better, full of strong language about ensuring non-discriminatory access to safety measures for seniors and the disabled. It wouldn't be directly binding here, but it carried weight. On Sunday afternoon, I emailed the HOA board again, CCing Karen. Subject, follow-up, notice dated date, Arthur Peterson, address, and consultation with fire marshal. Dear board members, further to my previous communication regarding the unfounded notice issued by President Miller, please be advised that I have scheduled a consultation with Fairfax County Fire Marshal Evans at my grandfather's residence for tomorrow, Monday, at 9 a.m. to review the situation and the installed safety equipment. We believe Marshal Evans's expert assessment will confirm that the visual fire alarm system is not only compliant with all applicable county-adopted fire codes, including IFC 2021 and NFPA 72, but represents a necessary safety enhancement for a resident who is deaf, consistent with the principles of the Fair Housing Act. We trust this will resolve the matter and demonstrate that the violations cited in Miss Miller's notice, purportedly based on Serenity Springs Fire Safety Code Addendum 7, are without merit and potentially contradictory to established law. We invite any interested board members to attend this consultation. Sincerely, Alexander Peterson, on behalf of Arthur Peterson. I attached the confirmation email from the fire marshal's office. Checkmate? Or close to it. Let Karen try to spin her way out of that. Monday morning dawned bright and clear. Inside, the tension was thick enough to spread on toast. Grandpa Arthur was dressed in his good cardigan, sitting at the kitchen table with his tablet ready. Maria arrived early, looking nervous but resolute, her binder of permits and specs clutched tight. I had my laptop open, key documents bookmarked, coffee steaming beside me. At 8:55 a.m., a white county vehicle pulled up. Fire Marshal Evans emerged, tall, authoritative, uniform crisp, face serious. He looked like a man who didn't suffer fools gladly, which gave me a surge of optimism. As Evans approached the porch, Karen Miller scurried across her lawn, clipboard in hand, looking slightly less confident than Saturday, but still determined. Only one other board member, a nervous-looking woman named Susan, who I recognized from previous visits, trailed hesitantly behind her. Good. Less audience for Karen's inevitable meltdown. "Marshal Evans?" I said, stepping out to meet him, offering a hand. "Alex Peterson. Thanks for coming out on short notice." He gave my hand a firm shake, his gaze sharp. "Mr. Peterson, understand there's a bit of a disagreement regarding some fire safety installations." His eyes flickered towards Karen, then Maria. "You could say that, Marshal," I replied evenly. "Perhaps we could step inside." We gathered in the living room. Grandpa Arthur offered Evans a seat, which he took. Karen and Susan remained standing near the door, Karen already shuffling papers on her clipboard. "Okay," Evans began, getting straight to business. "I've reviewed the initial emails. There's a dispute about visual fire alarms, electrical work, and an egress pathway. Miss Miller, as the complainant representing the HOA, please outline your specific concerns based on code." Karen launched into her prepared speech, though her voice lacked its usual booming confidence. "Marshal, thank you for coming. The primary issue is the unauthorized electrical work conducted by this contractor," she gestured towards Maria, "for these flashing devices." She held up the orange notice. "As per Addendum 7, Section 4B of our community's binding safety code, this requires prior written ARC approval, which was not granted. The devices themselves, these strobes," she shuddered delicately, "their frequency is disruptive, potentially hazardous, violating Section 9C. Furthermore, the resident maintains an obstructed egress pathway in the rear bedroom, filled with flammable hobby materials, a clear violation of Section 11A. Evans listened impassively, making a few notes. Then he looked at me. "Mr. Peterson?" "Showtime." I took a breath. "Marshal Evans, thank you. Alex Peterson again. The flashing devices Miss Miller refers to are, as you know, standard visual notification appliances compliant with NFPA 72, Chapter 18. I held up the manufacturer's spec sheet Maria had provided. They are specifically designed for persons who are deaf or hard of hearing, like my grandfather, Arthur Peterson. Grandpa nodded from his chair. These units were professionally installed, or rather being installed by Miss Garcia, a licensed electrical contractor. I indicated Maria, who held up her license and the submitted plans. The installation meets or exceeds all requirements under the National Electrical Code and NFPA 72 regarding wiring, placement, and synchronization with the existing audible alarm system. It is fundamentally a life safety upgrade, not a hazard, I continued, addressing Karen's points directly. Regarding Section 4 unauthorized electrical modification, aside from the fact that plans were submitted, denying necessary accessibility modifications like this could present significant issues under the Federal Fair Housing Act's requirements for reasonable accommodation. As for Section 9C, disruptive lighting, the flash rate and intensity are explicitly governed by NFPA 72, Section May 3rd 18, and related subsections, precisely to ensure effectiveness in alerting occupants during a fire, especially in smoky conditions. It has nothing to do with ambient disruption. I saw Karen's eyes narrow. Susan looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Finally," I said, turning to the last point, "the alleged Section 11A violation regarding obstructed egress pathway and flammable hobby materials. Perhaps you'd like to see the room in question?" Evans nodded. I led him, followed by the others, to the small hobby room. The train set sat neatly on its table against the far wall. 2 windows were clear and accessible. "This," I gestured to the layout, "is the obstruction. As you can see, it allows for more than the 36-inch minimum clear width for egress pathways, as generally defined in the IRC, Section R311. Both windows are potential secondary escape routes under R310. The flammable materials consist primarily of landscape flocking, plastic structures, and this." I picked up the tiny bottle of model cement. "Hardly a significant fire load requiring intervention." Marshal Evans walked around the small room, peered at the train set, checked the window latches. He looked back at the visual alarm strobe mounted correctly near the ceiling. He turned to Karen, his expression unreadable but definitely not friendly. "Ma'am," he said, his voice dangerously calm, "based on my inspection and knowledge of the codes adopted by this county, the 2021 International Fire Code and NFPA 72, these visual alarms are correctly installed, meet national standards, and represent a necessary safety feature for a resident with hearing impairment. The electrical work appears compliant. This model train layout does not constitute an egress pathway obstruction under any reasonable interpretation of the code." Karen stammered, But our Addendum 7, it's very specific. Section 11A. "Marshal," I interjected smoothly, holding out a copy of the flimsy Addendum 7-page Grandpa had found in the binder, along with a printout of the actual filed HOA bylaws. "Perhaps you'd be interested in reviewing the HOA's purported Fire Safety Code Addendum 7. It seems to contain several clauses, including the ones cited against my grandfather, that are inconsistent with established county-adopted codes, potentially unenforceable, and possibly discriminatory under the Fair Housing Act's provisions for reasonable accommodations for persons with disabilities." Evans took the papers. He scanned Addendum 7, his brow furrowing deeper with every line. He compared it against the official bylaw printout. The silence stretched, thick with Karen's dawning panic. Finally, Evans looked up, pinning Karen with a stern gaze. "Miss Miller, HOA rules and regulations, no matter how well-intentioned, cannot supersede adopted county, state, or federal laws and codes, particularly those pertaining to life, safety, and accessibility. Furthermore, attempting to enforce regulations that are fabricated, misrepresented, or clearly contradictory to established codes is highly problematic. This Addendum 7 appears to contain significant discrepancies and potential overreaches of authority." He handed the papers back to a stunned Susan. "I find no violations of the actual fire code here. Miss Garcia," he nodded to Maria, "you are clear to complete your installation. Board members," his gaze swept over Susan and Karen, "I strongly advise you to consult with your legal counsel immediately to review all your governing documents and addendums for compliance with applicable laws, including fire codes and the Fair Housing Act. Misrepresenting code requirements and attempting punitive action based on such misrepresentations can carry serious consequences." He gave a final, sharp nod. Mr. Peterson," he acknowledged Grandpa and me, "thank you for your cooperation. Ensure those alarms are tested regularly. Have a good day." And with that, Fire Marshal Evans departed, leaving behind a tableau of bureaucratic devastation. Karen stood frozen, her face pale, clipboard dangling uselessly at her side. Susan looked like she wanted the ground to swallow her whole. She rushed forward. "Tita! Mr. Peterson, Arthur, Alex! We are so deeply embarrassed and sorry. Karen's actions were unacceptable. They absolutely do not represent the board's position. We were not aware of the specifics of this Addendum 7 issue. We will be taking immediate action to rectify this, I assure you." Karen finally found her voice, a venomous whisper. "This isn't over, Alexander. You used your connections." "I used the facts, Karen," I said quietly, but firmly. "The actual rules. Something you might want to familiarize yourself with." She glared daggers at me, then turned and practically fled back to her house. Susan offered another flustered apology and scurried after her. The relief in the room was palpable. Maria let out a whoosh of air. "Wow, just wow! Thanks, Alex. I seriously thought I was going to lose my license or get sued over model trains." "Never underestimate the power of a petty tyrant with a clipboard," I said wryly. "Glad we could sort it out? Ready to finish up?" Maria grinned. Absolutely, let's get these strobes flashing. Grandpa Arthur beamed, patting my arm. He went to the kitchen and came back with a plate of his famous oatmeal raisin cookies for Maria. He showed me his tablet. Good job, son. You hit her with the rule book. Hard, very satisfying. I smiled, signing back. Learned from the best engineer I know how to read the instructions carefully. Maria finished the installation, tested the system. The loud, audible alarms blared, instantly accompanied by the bright, rhythmic flashing of the strobes in every key room. Perfect. I paid her, adding a generous tip for the emotional roller coaster. Weeks later, back amidst the controlled chaos of Capitol Hill, I got an email update from Grandpa. Subject: Serenity Restored. Karen Miller had been formally censured by the HOA board at an emergency meeting, the one her eviction hearing was supposed to be. She was subsequently removed as president in a special vote, replaced by the much more reasonable Susan. The infamous Addendum 7 was rescinded entirely. A formal letter of apology, signed by the entire board, minus Karen, was delivered to Grandpa Arthur. Best of all, the HOA newsletter announced mandatory upcoming training for all board members on understanding applicable state and county regulations, fire codes, and fair housing laws, to be conducted by none other than Fire Marshal Evans' office. I leaned back in my office chair, looking out over the DC skyline. You spend your days drafting legislation, debating clauses, trying to build frameworks for safety and fairness on a grand scale. You rarely get to see the direct impact, the immediate defense against someone twisting those rules for malicious intent. Grandpa Arthur was safe in his home of 40 years. His model trains were secure. His new visual alarms flashed brightly, a beacon of compliance. Karen Miller was learning a lesson in unintended consequences. Sometimes I thought with a smile, knowing the footnotes, the subsections, the precise bureaucratic language wasn't just a job. Sometimes it was a superpower. And deploying it against a clipboard-wielding Karen felt almost as satisfying as getting a bill passed. Almost?